Hello and welcome to Maybridge Community Church Online. Whether it's your first time exploring faith, or you're new to us, or you're a regular at Maybridge just tuning in for a cheeky bit of extra content, we are really glad you're here. My name is Chloe and I'm part of the staff team at Maybridge Community Church. Make sure you hit like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our online resources. If you would like to give as part of your worship, you can do so by heading to maybridge.org.uk/give. But of course, there's absolutely no pressure to do so. We are just glad you're here and we hope that you find this resource useful and helpful. For more information about faith, church family life, events, gatherings, anything that makes the Maybridge world go round, head to maybridge.org.uk or get in touch at info@maybridge.org.uk. Enjoy.
Well, hi, I'm Mark, Minister at Maybridge. This is week 2 of our 4 weeks looking at money. This is a really good time to think about how we use money as well as we can. I'm sure we all know the cost of living is going up seemingly by the day. Here's a few stats. The energy price cap rose 54% last month. It will go up again in October. National insurance is going up from 12% to 13.5%. Council tax, where we live at least, went up by 5% in April. Coffee, tea and hot chocolate have gone up 7.5%. Milk, cheese and eggs have gone up 6.1%. And even vegetables have gone up by 4.2%. The official stat is that the cost of living overall has gone up 5.5% as of February. But the poverty campaigner Jack Monroe points out that the way that this is measured uses something called the Consumer Price Index, which doesn't focus on the staple things that most people buy. So for example, she says that in the last 18 months, a 500-gram bag of pasta at a big-name supermarket has gone up from 29p to 70p. That's a 141% increase. Meanwhile, things like apples and mushrooms are getting smaller just as the prices rise. So in real terms, the cost of living is going up much more than 5% for the people that it really affects. In 2021, 2.5 million people used a food bank in the UK, which is 600,000 more than the previous year. We don't have this year's numbers yet, but I can only see that usage going up rather than down for this nation, which is one of the richest economies on earth. The Resolution Foundation has estimated that 1.3 million people are set to fall into absolute poverty due to the cost of living increase. I'm sure many of us listening today feel anxious or stressed, even just talking about these things. Maybe even angry that we're in this situation, personally or as a country. And the question is, how are followers of Jesus meant to respond to this? Well, just to recap the good news, last week we said that Jesus is the greatest financial advisor who ever lived, and what he says in Matthew 6 is a good foundation for this topic. He says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." So it begins with the heart. What we do with our money reveals our hearts like probably nothing else. This is true whether you have lots of money or very little. When Jesus said these words, he was talking about using our money now in a way that invests in the kingdom of God. In other words, where God is acknowledged and his ways are lived out. That's about more than saying, right, am I going to give away 5% of my money or 10% or what? It's about using 100% of our money in ways that please God and do us good. It's the bigger picture of stewardship, of managing our money well. So today we're wrestling with a practical here and now question. How do I store up treasures in heaven during the cost of living crisis? To set the scene, Jesus tells a long story in Luke 16. I'm going to share this, make a few observations, and then widen it out to what it means to steward money more generally as we see across the Bible. Here we go. Jesus told his disciples, there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called him in and asked him, "What is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you cannot be my manager any longer." The manager said to himself, "What shall I do now? My master's taken away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig and I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their homes." So he called in each one of his master's debtors. He asked the first, "How much do you owe my master?" 900 gallons of olive oil, he replied. Their manager told him, "Take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 450. Then he asked the second, "And how much do you owe?" 1,000 bushels of wheat, he replied. He told him, "Take your bill and make it 800. The master commended the dishonest manager because he'd acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of light. Just to pause there for a moment, the story so far looks like Jesus is about to say, "Be like this dishonest manager." And many people have wrestled with this story for that reason. How could Jesus give this as an example? But let's read on, because I don't think that's exactly what he's saying. I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it's gone, you'll be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much, and whoever is dishonest with very little can also be dishonest with much. So if you've not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? And if you've not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? No one can serve two masters. Either you'll hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. So in the first half of the passage, Jesus gives the example of a manager who is shrewd but dishonest. And it works for him because although he's dishonest, his plan is very clever. He uses his position as a steward of his boss's money to make friends. Jesus summarises what's happening by saying, "For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light." In other words, people who do not follow Jesus are generally better at taking advantage of the way the world works for their own good than people who are. And that's not really surprising. If money is your master rather than Jesus, you are likely to be more proficient at making more money for yourself. But after observing this, Jesus turned to his own people. He doesn't say, "Be dishonest like this manager," but he does say, "Use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourself." Anybody expect Jesus to say that? Doesn't that sound sort of a bit manipulative? Well, the idea is not about buying friendship off people, but using your money in such a way that you are in favour with other people. Think about it like this. If you're the sort of person who isn't stingy, and you buy ethically produced clothes, and you take responsibility for things, and you don't sponge off people, and you pay your bills on time, it's likely that one outcome of that will be that it's easier to get on with people. You'll make forever friendships in God's kingdom. Stewarding money well always helps you with your relationships. Strange but true. But Jesus then widens it out and talks about being trustworthy. And this is where it's about more than other people. He's now talking about being better than the dishonest manager, not merely the same. If God's people can prove themselves trustworthy in handling money, he will give them more to look after. He gives them more responsibility, not just for worldly wealth, but for what Jesus calls true riches. The shrewd manager in the story had some success with his strategy, but would anybody have trusted him with money again? Probably not. That's a card you can only play once. And so here's the thing. While it's good to be shrewd with money, it's even better to be shrewd whilst seeing yourself as trusted by God. Why? Because if we see money as something God has entrusted to us, money loses its power. It's not the boss, it's not in control of us. It's a tool to be used, not a master to be served. But then the big question for today, once we're moving in that direction, once we want to do that, how do we practically steward money well in a constantly changing world? At the moment in our family, we're at the beginning of working out pocket money with our daughter Anita, who is 7. And she's really sharp with numbers, but we found out that that's not the same as understanding the value of money. What we've done is tied her pocket money to doing jobs around the house. So if she does certain jobs, she gets a certain amount of money, and we track it all on a chart. After about 2 weeks of doing this, we went to Amberley Museum on a family trip, and we got to the end, and guess what? It was the dreaded gift shop. And these places are always designed so you can't avoid taking small children inside them, and it should be illegal. Honestly, one time we were in one of these places, and we sort of dropped Anita over a wall and then walked around, so we wouldn't have to take her into the gift shop. Anyway, as soon as we went in, obviously she wanted every single piece of shiny overpriced plastic tat on display. But this time, I was able to say, "You can have whatever you want, but it comes out of your pocket money. We're not paying for anything. And you could see there was a moment when the penny dropped, no pun intended, and she realised, I might have to take this seriously. Didn't last very long though. 5 minutes later, she came back to me holding a pink rock. She said, "Daddy, I really want this. It's amazing. I'll play with it all the time." And I said, well, to me, it sort of just looks like a pink rock. "Yeah, it is." Well, I think if you buy that, it's probably just going to sit on the shelf forever. "But I love it, Daddy." Okay, but it's up to you. It's £3. That's the equivalent of unloading the dishwasher 30 times. Your decision, but I want you to take your time, look at some of the things, and then tell me what you're going to do. I'm glad to say, in the end, she did not buy the pink rock. She brought a little telescope, which was much better. But this illustrates why it's hard to get specific when talking about how to steward money. Me and Naomi don't buy pink rocks or telescopes. Our financial world is different to hers. So we have to teach her principles to help her character grow so that she makes good decisions. And it's like that for everybody. None of us are in the same financial position as anybody else. But the Bible gives us principles and wisdom. And so here's a bit of a starter on how to steward well, based mostly on the book of Proverbs in the Old Testament, which is all about practical wisdom. Some of us will already be doing some of these things, I'm sure, but see if any of these grab you as helpful. 6 things. Firstly, know what you've been given. Very basically, a good place to start is to actually know what you have. How much money do you have? What's in your account? What's your regular income? This should be relatively easy for most people because usually we have a small number of income streams like salary or maybe benefits, whereas of course we have many things that we have to pay for. In our house, I get paid once a month, Naomi gets paid once a month, we get child benefit once a month. These are all our incomes. I know exactly how much that adds up to. And the total amount is what God has given us to steward each month. Not 10% of that, not 50%, all of it God has given us to steward each month. Sometimes the amount changes, looking forward to paying off my student loan, but it's pretty consistent. And so that's base 1, knowing what God has actually given you to use at this time. Second thing, assess your heart. This is always the hardest bit. No spreadsheet or plan can do this for you. Nobody can tell you what's going on exactly. This is between you and God. Jesus said you can't serve both God and money. And if you're really honest, where does money potentially have a hold on you? This is certainly something to invite God into. Proverbs 21 verse 2 says, "A person may think their own ways are right, but the Lord weighs the heart." Left to our own devices, our hearts will justify all sorts of things. I did a big list of ways that it could do that last week. Everything from anxiety to hoarding to gambling it away to feeling superior to people with less money than you. Money can control us in so many ways. One thing that's very useful is to consider what was modelled to you about money as you grew up. What did your parents or carers tend to do with money? What did they teach you? My parents were always very frugal when it came to themselves, and they would hardly ever spend any money on themselves. But I married Naomi, whose upbringing was a bit different. Her parents are more well off, and they're more likely to spend money than save money. And they like to celebrate things, and there's a lot that's good about that. So for us, it's been interesting and helpful to sort of compare these things and work out what's good that we want to copy and what might we want to do something differently from. Third thing, have a plan. When it comes down to it, there are basically 6 things you can do with money. Save it, spend it, gamble it, give it, invest it, neglect it. Some of those are probably better than others. If you don't have some sort of plan for your money though, it will disappear in no time, it just will. Now I'm by no means a natural at this, but the simple act of making a plan can really help. Proverbs 21 verse 5 says, "The plans of the diligent lead to profit, as surely as haste leads to poverty." It's not glamorous, it might seem dull, but planning pays off. Just listing all your outgoings, looking at your bank statements and saying, what do I actually spend money on? Where does it go? Where do I want it to go? Within this, one thing that's really helpful is to be clear about what are things that you want and what are things that you need. Some things you clearly need, like food and shelter and water. Some things are not needed, but you can make a strong case for, like a car and a washing machine, electricity. Other things are nice, but we don't need them. A TV, a holiday, jewellery. But even out of the things you have a strong case for, You don't need the most expensive version. Nobody needs a new car or a brand new bike or anything like that, or to buy all their food from Waitrose. So you can see how you can spend on what you need rather than what you want. I'm not saying don't spend on anything that you don't want rather than need. Spending on stuff that you merely want isn't all bad. I'm saying, do you know the difference, and do you have an idea of where your money is going? As I mentioned last week, on May the 18th and May the 26th, Wednesday and Thursday evenings, Alan and Richard are running a workshop at 77 The Strand on managing money well. Whether you're rich or poor, it'll be super helpful. Come in your partnership group, come alone to the evening. To the evening, you're very welcome. 7:45 till 9. It's all about having a plan. For us, one simple thing that Naomi and I do that I found really helps is this. When our pay comes into our account each month, we have 2 standing orders that go out the next day. One of them goes straight into another account from which we give money away. The other one is a saving account. That means we don't have to remember to do anything. We don't even see the money before it's moved on, because if that money sat in our account, the temptation will be to think, oh, we've got loads of money lying around, let's buy this or that. Our system stops that from happening a bit. Fourth thing, be accountable. Most people in our culture don't enjoy talking about money. It's seen as a very personal thing. And it's difficult because, as I said before, none of us are in the same situation. But we can still help each other. As Proverbs 12 verse 15 says, the way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice. Can we make it okay for one another to talk about money in the right context? According to Christians Against Poverty, the average person who gets into debt struggles for 2 years before they tell anyone. Wouldn't we be much better off if we shared our reality and got support way earlier? I know we might feel embarrassed, but as a church, we're extended family. We need to grow a culture where it's okay to talk about money. Again, whether we're struggling or whether we're wealthy. Can we be radically more open with each other about money? If you were thinking of a huge financial decision, would you discuss it with people who know you, or would you just do it? If money is a potential master in our lives, wouldn't we be better off if we opened ourselves up to the input of other people? Fifth thing, if in doubt, be generous. The default direction of the human heart is to the self. So if in doubt, be generous. Be out of pocket. Be inconvenienced. We'll get into generosity more next week, but for now, Proverbs 19 verse 17 says, whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he'll reward them for what they have done. Proverbs 22 verse 9 says, the generous will themselves be blessed, for they share their food with the poor. It's fascinating. One way the Bible motivates us to generosity is by telling us it will be good for us. God blesses you when you're generous. And who wouldn't want that? But more on that next week. And sixthly, depend on God. You can do all those 5 other points in a sort of mechanical way, sort of just do it. But the heart of it is to depend on God for our needs. I don't mean this to be airy-fairy. Depending on God means we try to manage what He's given us as best as we can, and we entrust the results of doing that to Him. Because doing things God's way doesn't immediately feel good every time. Here's a few examples of what I mean by this. It could be that because you trust God, you choose to buy the more expensive, ethically produced clothes and believe that God will honour that choice. It could be that because you trust God, you budget to spend less on entertainment and believe that because God is sufficient, that will not leave you bored or joyless. It could be because you trust God, you choose to be more open with good friends about money, believing God will use people wisely for your growth. It could be that because you trust God, you choose to give what's in your savings account anonymously to someone who's struggling and believe that God will make sure you have enough when you need it. All these are examples of people trusting God with money, all of which I've seen people do, but which couldn't all be done at once. The point is, it can look very different in our different circumstances, but the underlying idea is God is trusted. God is depended on, not money. And so as I close, the answer to the question of how to store treasures in heaven in a cost of living crisis is simple because it's the same as it always is. Submit all your resources in every season to the way of Jesus. As a church, we're a community of people with all sorts of different circumstances and money situations. Some of us are well off, some of us not so much, but we can all move forward in this. When things are difficult for a nation or a culture, That's when it really stands out if we do things God's way and demonstrate that it works, that it's healthy, that it's good for people. If we're surrounded by those who are stressed about money and who understandably are in a bit of a panic and get anxious, we can serve the wider world by living a different way. Imagine this. Imagine if we as God's people can depend on Him to meet our needs and manage our money so well, and most of all be free from the control of money, that we become a stabilising, life-giving, joy-bringing presence to our community, rich or poor. Here's some wonderful words in Isaiah 58 which capture this, and it was originally directed at the people of Israel, but I think it stands true for us too. Isaiah 58, it says, "If you do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing finger and malicious talk, and if you spend yourselves on behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness and your night will become like the noonday." You know, stewarding money is not one of those things that stirs people up. It doesn't sound super spiritual. But I tell you what, God is very concerned with how we use our money and what it says about who's really the master in our lives. And if it moves Him and it bothers Him, it should move us and bother us too. Let me pray. Father, thank you for all the resources you give us, the money that you give us to steward and manage in your ways. And we confess that often we see it as our money, or maybe we give a little bit to charity or to church, or we tithe it in some way and we think we've done our work. But we want to submit all of our money to you. We want to make wise decisions with all of our money in your ways. And I pray that we would do that and that we'd experience the blessing of that, we'd experience the joy of that, and it would give us a freedom from the control of money that maybe we've never had. And I pray it would impact our community as we do it too, Lord, that others would see how we have a different relationship with money and that it's better. Amen.